Welcome to Early Years Together, the podcast where imagination meets insight and playful learning is at the heart of everything we do. I'm Deborah Brown.
And I'm Dr. Jacqueline Young. We're both Associate Professors at the University of Sussex, and our passion for early childhood education comes from years of teaching, researching and learning alongside other amazing practitioners.
In this series, we'll chat about fresh ideas, challenge a few assumptions and shine a light on the incredible work happening in early years classrooms and communities every single day.
Expect conversations grounded in research and experience. We aim to bring you practical strategies, inspiring stories and research-based thinking to help you feel confident and connected in your practice.
If you enjoy today's conversation, we'd love for you to subscribe, share the podcast and leave us a review so more people can join in.
So let's get started. What's our topic for discussion today?
Since we've had a few episodes talking through more practical examples, we thought now would be a good time to talk about some of the theory behind how language develops, how this can inform how we support babies in the first few months of their lives and when they're learning to communicate.
Yeah, so there are several theories with different ideas about how children learn to speak and communicate. So we could start with Skinner. Skinner's theory came out in about 1957 and it stated that children imitate sounds and words from their environment and that all of these sounds are kind of positively reinforced with that to and fro in the interaction with other people. It's people that then reward those sounds and those interactions, shaping what language is absorbed and repeated back through that feedback process. So in Skinner's model, the environment and interactions with others are really, really important and essential to how you learn to speak. To Skinner, language was like any other skill that could be shaped and taught and learnt, much like, learning how to brush your hair.
But there are some issues with that, aren't there? So, because children learn to talk so quickly, much faster than they learn other skills and things.
Yeah, so after Skinner published his work, there was somebody called Chomsky who came along and basically made that point that, that clearly can't be exactly what's going on because of the speed that language acquisition happens in those very early stages. So Chomsky's theory of language development was that humans are born with an innate ability to learn language. So it's like that humans are hardwired to develop some kind of language and that the rules for that language acquisition are inborn.
But could that be critiqued too? Because Chomsky sounds like he underestimates the importance of the environmental factors.
Yeah, so essentially it's that debate between what matters more, nature or nurture. Today, most people probably accept that it's a bit of both, and neither theory is entirely thought of as being correct. Of course, we do have to take into account that both theories were very much from a certain time and a certain place. So they were formulated whilst looking at English, for instance. And in fact, that kind of bias around European languages has continued in general language research. So Kidd and Garcia in 2022 sort of did a bit of a scope and pointed out that 85% of psycholinguistic studies, so studies that are about language acquisition in adults, were based on only around 10 languages, and 30% of that was in fact English. And that child language acquisition studies are estimated to have only looked at about 1% of the world's languages in total. So although we think we know quite a bit about language acquisition, we do have to remember that maybe we don't know quite as much as we think we do.
But we do know that some of what Chomsky said has merit. From birth, babies want to connect with others and are really eager to interact. For example, they might kick their legs excitedly ready to play a peekaboo game, and these are important parts of an interaction that adults should notice and encourage.
I agree. I think we'd all agree that children are really born with that innate desire to communicate and will seek out interactions with others and with adults. But I think that communication might not always necessarily be verbal. So I know one of the theories we talk about at university is the 100 languages of children. So do you want to explain that, Deborah?
Yeah, of course. The concept of the 100 languages of children is rooted in the Reggio Emilia philosophy, and Loris Malaguzzi wrote about that philosophy. He wrote the 100 languages of children, which is a verse that celebrates the idea that children express themselves and make meaning through a multitude of symbolic languages, not just spoken words, but through alternative approaches such as movement, drawing, sculpture, music, dramatic play. And this approach, the Reggio Emilia approach, positions that children are active communicators capable of sharing their thoughts, emotions and ideas in diverse and creative ways.
Yeah, so that's that idea, isn't it? Again, we return back to the idea that children have agency and that they're not this empty vessel to be filled, that they are, active participants in their own learning.
And following on, it's really important that we recognise that babies and young children need to be surrounded by people who see them as active communicators. So, actually knowing and understanding what can be done to support children in these early attempts at communication.
So that brings us back, doesn't it, to thinking about practical things again and what we can really do. So I think probably one of the first tips really is just copying a baby. And that doesn't necessarily even mean sounds. It can mean facial expressions. So we've all had that moment, haven't we, where children are blowing raspberries and we're blowing raspberries back, or they're frowning and we frown, or they smile and we smile. That sort of to and fro turn taking, copying and imitating probably needs to originally be initiated by the adult.
Yeah, and I think as well, once the children begin to kind of make noises, and coo and things like that, actually that copying is still just as valid. So, and as children develop their kind of babble and sounds that they make, the all of those early sounds, it's really important that we pick up on those as well.
And I suppose it's just also, it's cluing into what they're interested in, isn't it? So, if they're looking at something, then it's directing your own talk at what the baby is looking at. So, for instance, I don't know, they've latched their eyes on a soft furry cat, soft toy or something, you'd then say, "Cat, isn't he lovely and furry?" or something like that, and actually tailoring your talk around what the child is focused on.
And it also comes back to that opportunity to pause and wait, and wait for the baby to respond. So giving them time to respond and having the opportunity to copy or babble back what you've said is really, really key.
Yeah, and I suppose then another technique might be thinking about providing choices, really simple choices that, almost force a child into communicating, even if it's non-verbal and through gesture, they still need to communicate with you. So, for instance, giving two basic alternatives, when it's snack time, do you want the red bowl or the blue bowl? Or do you want the breadstick or the carrot? Building it into those transition times, but really creating an environment where you're not only encouraging talk and communication, or even if it's non-verbal and through gesture, but you're actually requiring it.
And I think as well, that idea of that repetition of those words, so if it is in part of a routine, such as getting used to, this is a breadstick, this is a carrot, repeating those words, but also expanding that meaning. Do you want some water? Oh, it's really nice cold water, giving them that, giving them those alternatives is really key as well.
All kinds of simple games can really help babies and other non-verbal children to learn. It's that turn taking that is a part of communication that's so important. Some of those games are things like, I don't know, peekaboo, blowing bubbles, any kind of ball play, stacking things, knocking things down, that schema where they're transporting things, taking things out and leaving them all over the place, singing songs, all those games are a great way to engage very young learners.
Yeah, and games games that you've spoken about just there, Jacqueline, are a great way to engage really young learners who are pre-verbal, but also older learners who may have communication difficulties. So it teaches that back and forth of communication and interaction, and it really kind of supports the idea that interactions facilitate a conversation.
I think key in that is that you go with the child's interest, because there's no point trying to engage conversation if the child isn't engaged. Once you've got your interest, you can then do things like build anticipation. So instead of going straight into the activity, building in pauses. So things like ready, steady, smile, and then wait for the child to interact in some way before you go.
That really is a key way where you're showing that you're responding to the reaction of a child and you're really noticing what they're doing. So that idea of using those words to accompany their reaction as well, go and then moving, is that really way. You can also, if they're really happy and excited by it, when the child reach out, acknowledge their response. And not respond again until they're ready and they show you that they're ready to play again.
Yeah, and that might be facial expressions, giggles, gestures. It might not necessarily be verbal, but all of these are valid forms of communication.
As we're rapidly heading to the end of our discussion today, I think what we'd like to do is just kind of offer some main points that you could take away. It feels like we've covered a lot, doesn't it?
It does.
Actually, we started off with talking about language acquisition, and so just remembering that's that innate ability that children are born with, and that the interactions with those around us and the environment are all really key. And actually children and babies, any interactions can be completed through words, body language, facial expressions, actions, singing. All of those things are really important with interactions. We talked about that serve and return, so taking turns, waiting for a response. For all children, that builds confidence and independence as well. And again, it's about that being a warm, responsive, attentive practitioner, adapting your language to meet the needs of all individual children.
Being with others helps children to build those social relationships, which provides opportunities for friendship, empathy, and sharing emotions. And that does, in fact, now bring us to the close of today's episode of The Early Years Together. So we're so glad that you joined us.
Yeah, be sure to subscribe so you'll never miss an update. And leaving a review really helps others to discover the podcast.
So share this conversation with colleagues or friends and connect with us on LinkedIn and other platforms to continue the dialogue.
I'm Deborah Brown.
And I'm Dr. Jacqueline Young. Thanks for listening.